On May the 7th, 2016, the annual Cinco de Mayo festival was taking part in Omaha, Nebraska. What started off as a fun, exciting day out for parents and children alike soon turned into a harrowing nightmare when 11-year-old Elizabeth Gilreath boarded the King's Crown, an old spinning teacups type ride. What followed was one of the most brutal fairground disasters that I have ever covered. But what exactly happened that day? Let's talk about it. This is the horrific King's Crown disaster, the fate of Elizabeth Gilreath. Elizabeth Gilreath from Nebraska was never seen without a smile on her face. Characterised by her long ginger hair, Elizabeth was a popular girl that had ambitions of becoming a senator. She was popular and well liked in school, and on the 7th of May 2016, she went with her friends to the annual Cinco de Mayo festival in Omaha. The Cinco de Mayo festival is an annual celebration of Mexican heritage and culture, featuring music, food, and a parade. It also includes carnival rides, and that year its star attraction was the King's Crown. Although today it would be known as a teacup ride, the King's Crown is actually a hustler. Hustlers were made by Watkins Rides, a now defunct company with little known information about them. Only a few of these rides were made. The ride has a large boom connected to smaller booms at either end. Large spinning pods capable of holding about 8 people are attached to the ends of the smaller booms. On that day, 11-year-old Elizabeth Gilreath boarded the King's Crown ride at approximately 1:30 p.m. The ride started up, and Elizabeth was captured on camera smiling and ready, but just a few seconds later, disaster would strike. A few seconds into the ride, eyewitnesses would tell the media that the ride suddenly jerked hard up and down. This caused Elizabeth to slip underneath the metal bar and onto the floor of the King's Crown pod. While she fell, her hair got entangled within the ride's spinning mechanism, which kept spinning, pulling her hair tight in the process. The force was so strong that Elizabeth's scalp was pulled completely off. The children on the ride who was in the pod were screaming for the ride operator to stop the ride. One witness who was on the ride with her said, "There was nothing we could do, so I stood up and I was like yelling, 'Stop the ride, stop the freaking ride.'" She went on to say, her hair was really long, and it caught on and it started twisting more, and that's when some mum came and finally stopped the ride herself. The ride operator was caught on CCTV running away from the ride, but we can most likely assume this was to get help. Whilst this happened, one absolutely heroic woman saw the events unfold in front of her eyes. She ran towards Elizabeth, up the steps, and tried to physically hold the ride to stop it spinning any further. The woman, Jolene Cineros, said, "It was still spinning. I had to stop it with my hands and turn it to the point where it was towards the platform." At first, she didn't know if it was her child or someone else's. She said, "This child was without hair. I didn't know if it was my child. I just knew that there was a child that needed help." She managed to stop the ride spinning and cradled Elizabeth in her arms. Elizabeth was now unconscious on the floor, and members of the public were using their t-shirts to stop the bleeding as they waited for emergency services. Her father said, "She was ripped and pulled. She was tortured." A massive crowd had now formed around the King's Crown. The ambulance arrived and transported Elizabeth to hospital. She was in critical condition, with many doctors unsure if she would pull through. After this, the police closed the ride down and an investigation was launched. Much like you guys probably are right now, I was very confused at which spinning mechanism her hair could have caught into. After doing a bit of research, I imagine the mechanism was what you can see in the middle of the video right now. This was never clarified by interviews or investigators though, so it may have been a different mechanism. Fellow fairgoers were left shocked and shaken by the incident. Tywana Carter said, "It was like, wow, how can this happen at an event like this?" Another concerned mother stated, "It's scary because you have little kids. Imagine when September Fest comes and you have these rides again. I mean, what's the possibility of that happening to a kid that you know or a family member or something?" Meanwhile, the police started their investigation to find out what happened. They shut the ride down and began their work. Omaha Police Lieutenant Steve Caverny said, "That's part of the review. We're trying to determine if there was a malfunction or if it was just an accident. We're not sure at this time." The ride operators and fair workers fully cooperated with the police whilst their investigation was underway. A release from the Nebraska Department of Labor stated there were no issues identified that would have prevented a permit from being issued for the ride, and the ride underwent its most recent inspection on April the 19th, as mandated by the Amusement Ride Act. They went on to conclude that there was no malfunctions with the ride, and that it had been maintained and that there was nothing wrong with it. They checked the restraints and also found that they were adequate for this kind of ride. Nothing was ever brought up about the sudden jerk eyewitnesses saw, and the ride operator was not blamed. Officials believed it was a freak accident. Meanwhile, Elizabeth was in the hospital. After completing 2 head surgeries, 3 skin grafts, 1 eye surgery, and 28 blood transfusions, she pulled through. Doctors had confirmed she was going to live, but she was far from okay. Her father said, "They don't even know if the muscles will work and if my daughter will ever see again. At this point, we are not sure if her scalp will die or stay alive." Her scalp was pulled off in such force that the muscles around her eyes were damaged, rendering her blind. But more importantly, she was alive, and although she could only communicate through hand squeezes, she was reacting well to treatment. A few weeks later, an update was released. Elizabeth was doing better, her breathing tube was removed, and she was able to speak to her mother. After 3 surgeries, she was able to open 1 eye. Her mother said, "She told me, 'Mummy, I can see you.'" She didn't remember the accident, all she could recall was waking up in the hospital. Thankfully, a year after, she was doing much better. Her hair began to grow back. Elizabeth said, "I can't believe it's almost a year now. I can actually pull my hair up into a ponytail, and the thing is, it's growing." Elizabeth would show extreme resilience in her recovery. This story also would show how communities can pull together after a tragedy. Hairstylist Chevy Kozak heard about Elizabeth's story in the news, and she immediately took action by contacting the girl's parents and assuring them of her support as she begins the healing process. Chevy said, "Girls going through their teenage years have a rough time of it as it is, and for her to be healing through these injuries for the next few years is going to be difficult." She went on to say, "To have some expertise to help her through it as her hair begins to grow back, wrapping scarves, wigs, things of the sort, definitely something we were able to help with." Amazingly, she offered to help her once a month until she graduated. She said, "We want to help her through homecoming. We want to see her through the prom. We want to see her through graduation." Although the last updates were posted a few years ago, it seems that she is doing much better today, and I am so glad to see it. As she stated herself, "My scars don't define me. Nobody's scars should define them." Lawsuits were filed against the fair and the ride manufacturer, but the results were never released to the public, so I'm unable to say anything further on that. Her mother released a statement saying, "The public's response is amazing. I cannot thank them enough for what they have done to my daughter." She also claimed that there needed to be tougher regulations, saying, "I want rides to be safer. I want to make sure there are seatbelts on these rides, and that there is more maintenance done to them." Her mother also wanted Elizabeth's story to be shared to whoever would see it. I hope all the family is doing better today. I believe the ride is still operating, but these types of ride are now becoming fewer and fewer due to their old age. As always, this is not an AI channel, I do everything myself, and if you appreciate my work, subscribe, and if you want to go the extra step to support the channel, maybe consider becoming a member. Although horrific, there are some amazing elements to this story, from the hero mother who stopped the ride, to the hairdresser offering to help Elizabeth until she graduated, and of course, the resilience of such a strong child. Let me know what you think of this story in the comments below, and as always, thank you for watching.